Hello, BookTube. I'm once again coming to you with a library tour for 2022, and while I'm up here as a guest at the old house in Vermont, I don't have access to my own shelves, so instead I'm going through virtual shelves of Library of the Lost, books that I no longer own, at least in this current form, but that I have read and in many cases reviewed, and that I wanted to show you in case they're of interest to you. And we'll start with Roman history, another piece of Roman history. This is by Jesper Majbaum Madsen, and it's called Eager to be Roman. And it's a very granular study of what the inhabitants of Pontus and Bithynia thought about the extension of the Roman franchise. What would it be? What would the hoops need to be, the financial and otherwise hoops they would need to jump through in order to become Roman citizens, in order to gain the legal and social benefits of citizenship that was being offered to them on terms. And this book, the author goes at the typical idea of that citizenship, which was that it was done as a pro forma thing, where the Roman mob is making you an offer you can't refuse, so you'll go through the gestures in order to get preferred shipping rates or whatnot. This author claims that there was social cachet to it as well, that the Bithynians actually wanted to call themselves Romans, that there was an esteem to it. Very interesting stuff, maybe a little too granular for the general reader of Roman history, but well worth it if you're not. Then we have, this is an older book, this is The Gossamer Years, translated by Edward Seidensticker, who did a great translation of Tale of Genji. And this is a book from the same time. This is from the Heian court. This is from the same era as Genji. And it also is written by a slightly bored, over-intellectual, literate noblewoman. We don't know her name. You can take some fairly informed guesses, but at the same time that Murasaki Shikibu was writing The Tale of Genji, at the same time that Sei Shonagon was writing the Pillow Book, this woman was writing this book, which is it's a weird and wonderful volume. I don't actually know why this isn't better known. This translation by Seidensticker is probably 100 years old, and it might be the last one, which is inexcusable. The woman who narrates this story is an unhappy wife, one of many that her husband has, and she isn't revolutionary enough to want to be the only one, but she wants more attention than she's getting, and you can also tell it just permeates these pages that she's bored, and it is very touching in that way. I mean, the book is fascinating anyway because it gives you another glimpse into this extremely literate culture that produced so many masterpieces. But it's also very touching because you feel for her. She's present on every page. And I think it's a terrible... I don't have this old... is this Kodansha Press? Tut books, but I don't have this old paperback anymore. And Penguin has never printed a new translation of this. There's never been a giant deluxe edition with notes or new introduction or anything like that. And you'd think there would be. I don't really understand it. Unless there is such a translation, I'm just not aware of it. If there is, feel free to sing out in the comments field. Then this next one is a great work. It's a classic of Russian literature. And once again, I am going to ask, where is this author? Where are the new translations? Where is the critical appreciation? Where is the popular appreciation? This is Anatoly Rybakov, and this is his book Heavy Sand. It's an absolutely brilliant generational novel. This author was born in what is now Ukraine, and his books are all brilliant. Even in the English language, this English language translation is from decades ago, and even then I could tell, okay, I'm not just reading, the Russian version of John Jakes. I'm reading a great book. I'm reading a stereotypically great Russian novel. There's something, as I've said many times, there's something in the water. Over in Russia, they have a penchant for extremely powerful, long epics of prose. And they also have a penchant for poetry as well. It's just not fair. But this, as you can see, this was originally a Penguin. When I scanned this cover, this was a Penguin volume. No idea what happened to it. Probably it fell apart. But again, I want to know, just as with the Gossamer Years, I want to know, where is this book? Why isn't this better known? Why isn't this author considered a great 20th century Soviet-era Russian writer? But it was really, really good. It was really effective. I definitely recommend it. We'll go for a slightly lighter fare. This is the great Eleanor Lippman. I don't know how many of you know this author, but her books are absolutely wonderful. They are the perfect combination of smart and fluffy. I don't think she would like the word fluffy, but they are popular literature is a term that's often used with scorn. These are popular literature with a brain and a heart. There's not an Ellie Lippman book that I have ever read, and I've read them all, that didn't make me feel just better when I was done, even though they don't sugarcoat anything. And this is the story. Isabel's bed is actually the horrifying destination at the beginning of the book. This is the story of a writer who goes to a ramshackle home on Cape Cod in order to write the memoir / fictionalized autobiography of a washed up star. And as such, this is probably more about the process of writing than any other Lippman book. If that fascinates you, it should, because she's really good on the subject, really, really good. I'm not saying it's insider baseball. There's still very much a human drama that unfolds as the narrator, as the main character, excavates the past. But there's a lot about writing here and about the tricks of the trade, the boredom of the trade, all that sort of thing. Then we have a memoir that is, I would like to think, partially fictionalized, but certainly this author is bringing all the best tools of fiction to the job. I don't know when this came. Oh, 2010. It says it right on the cover. I scanned my review copy. This is Marriage and Other Acts of Charity by Kate Braestrup. Kate Braestrup is a minister and writes, this is, I think, was her second book or her third book, just stories about contemporary marriage, what it's like, what the sacrifices are, drawn from her own history and also from the history of all sorts of her congregants. Do ministers have congregants? I don't really know, but she has talked to a million people about the ins and outs of marriage, the sacrifices and the joys, and it's brought out really well in this book. You might worry, like I do, that marriage books can get saccharine, but this is not like that. This is just delightful. Okay, this next one is a classic. It's not as well known as the classic that this author has to his name. This is very much a one-book author, unfortunately. The author is Henry Beston, who you will know, those of you who know that name at all, will know it for The Outermost House, which is one of the greatest Cape Cod books ever written. They've made his birth. The Outermost House is a memorial on Cape Cod. It's a beautiful Cape Cod book, but it isn't the only thing that Henry Beston wrote. He also wrote Northern Farm, which is a chronicle of Maine, of life in Maine, the state of Maine here in the United States. If you're wondering what the state of Maine is like, those of you who've never been to the United States, that cover pretty much sums it up. Maine is cold most of the year. It's like Vermont on steroids. There are huge tracts of it that are wilderness, huge tracts of it that are sparsely populated, where you're a fair distance from your neighbor. The coastline, it has an immense and beautiful coastline. The coastline is very forbidding. Parts of southern Maine, the coastline can have beachy type resorts, but I have trekked all over Maine, most especially in the extreme north of the state near the Canadian border, but also everywhere in the south as well. And this is a great book. I wish I still had this mass market copy of it. I really do. And I wish I'd ever seen it since. I have not seen it since, or I would snap it up. This next one is by Stanislaus Dehaene. It's terrific. It's Reading in the Brain, and it is a book about reading, what it actually is, what scientifically, neurologically, what it actually is that we do when we transform these little marks, these squiggly marks on paper or on a screen, into something that can change our whole lives, that can rewire our cognition. It's not overly technical, and it's very inclusive, and it's written in a really bright kind of way. It's one of the best books on reading that I've ever read. Not most of the books I've read about reading are the other kind. They are the sociological kind, the personal kind, what reading meant to me, that sort of thing. This is one of the best books I've read on what reading actually is, on what it does in the brain. I highly, highly recommend it. If you read, this next one, this was a pan paperback. Wish I still had this. This is by Douglas Riemann, and it's called The White Guns. And Douglas Riemann was also Alexander Kent, who wrote the Bolitho novels. But he was monstrously prolific. So he wrote, the Bolitho novels are Napoleon-era seafaring adventures, but he also wrote contemporary, for him, 20th century, mid-20th century contemporary nautical novels as well. And this is one of them. And it is strange. It is a strange novel. It's because you would think, based on this author's métier, that he would write about ships at sea, about clashes in World War II between navies, the German Navy and the American Navy. Very much Nicholas Montserrat territory. You would expect that, and I would argue that you expect that with Nicholas Montserrat, and you don't largely get it. Even in the books of his that are right-centered in that area, you don't largely get it. You are not getting a typical World War II nautical story when you read Montserrat's book, The Ship That Died of Shame. You're getting something very different. It starts out maybe a little typical and then takes a left turn and never comes back. And you were happy for that. And the same thing is true here, because there is no warfare here. The World War II is over. And the German fleet has to be dismantled. And that's a nice, neat mechanical process. But it has, as you would imagine, it has a gigantic cloud of heavy, violent emotions all around it on both sides. I've read, at one point or another, pretty much everything that this author has written, and I think The White Guns is one of his best books. Certainly, it has a kind of a somber, non-showy melancholy that is nowhere in the Bolitho novels. The Bolitho novels are terrific, don't get me wrong, I love them, but there was something going on in the composition of the book. I don't know anything about the author. No idea at all. I don't know. From what my track record has been during this vacation, probably I'm going to hear from off stage that he's from Vermont, just up the road. It seems like every writer's from Vermont. But I know nothing about his biography, but I would actually love to know what the process of composition of this book was, because I don't think it reads like anything else that he wrote. Unless maybe it reads like some memoirs. Maybe he has memoirs that I haven't read. Anyway, this next one is a sensation from the 80s. Those of you who were reading in the 80s will remember it. This is The Rise and Fall of Great Powers by Paul Kennedy, in which he talks about five or six main powers in the United States, the Soviet Union, Japan, hence the sumo wrestler on the now inappropriate cover, the European Union, China, and talks about them in terms of their great nation status on a very economical basis, on terms of economics. I didn't really fall into the hype of this book when it came out. I liked reading it, but I thought it had long, dry periods to it, and it got praised everywhere. I don't know about economists. I have no idea if economists liked it, but my brethren in the reviewing community, went nuts over this book. They just tripped over themselves to hurl superlatives at it. I enjoyed it plenty, but I didn't see that. I didn't think that was warranted. So maybe it's time for a reread. I think I have a copy of this here in this room. In fact, I have this copy. Not the copy that I scanned 12 years ago, but another copy with this cover. I'll have to see. I don't think The Rise and Fall of Great Powers has been reprinted. And of course, the first thing you're going to think when you read it is how much has changed, not how much is the same. This next one, we're going to go back to feudal Japan. We're going to go back to the Heian era, roughly speaking. This is a historical novel by David Charney called Sensei, which had a sequel called, imaginatively enough, Sensei 2. And this is the story of, if you know about the massive feudal warfare between clans that is the main subject of the Tale of the Heike, then you know that such stories like that have millions of little stories that those epics are not concerned with. That you get tons of little stories in Tale of the Heike. That's what makes it so garishly fascinating, is that you get tons of those, but you get the sense that, the ordinary swordsman's experiences, there'll be a million of them. There'll be one for every different ordinary swordsman, and they aren't crammed into epics like that. And David Charney thought that would make great fodder for a historical novel. So here he has, a dandy who's never roughened his hand with the pommel of a sword in his life, who decides to become a swordsman, who decides to become a swordmaster in feudal Japan. And it's quite good. Sensei and Sensei 2 really have to be read together. This book sort of ends with you falling off a cliff, and Sensei 2 starts with you falling in midair. So I don't think you could read, I wouldn't advise you to read either one of them alone. And again, I don't know why these aren't reprinted. Because they're terrific. There's nothing in here that would age. They're terrific. If you could, an enterprising publisher, I don't know if David Charney is still alive. I always have such a bad track record in saying that. I say that authors are dead. Oh, this guy must be dead. And then one of you finds out still alive and in the process of suing me. I don't know if he's still alive. And I don't have any idea. Who was this? Ace. I have no idea who owns the copyright to these books. But some enterprising publisher ought to find out, get the copyright to these 2 books, put them together into one gigantic doorstop 1,000-page novel, and just run it as a book called Sensei. None of this Sensei 2 business, because I think it would find an audience. It's actually very, very good, better than you would think, for books that were basically, Shogun, the fad of Shogun. Then we have a book of a screenplay. And it's not an author you're going to expect to find. It's Stephen King. This is the screenplay of Storm of the Century. He wrote a screenplay for a TV show called Storm of the Century, in which the stereotypical small island off the coast of Maine is being threatened with the eponymous Storm of the Century. A gigantic winter storm is coming that is probably going to cut the island off for a long time. It's certainly going to do a huge amount of damage. And on the wings of that storm comes a mysterious figure. To this small town, which has the creepy kids, it has the staunch sheriff, it has the working stiffs who are written with such merciless condescension that I don't know why King hasn't been canceled for that alone. And into the midst of this local community comes a mysterious figure, and he has a mysterious pronouncement that he makes to the people who he kills someone. He kills a couple of people, and the cops arrest him. And the only thing he'll say to them is, "Give me what I want, and I'll go away." And there's no way, as in so much of Stephen King, there is no way that anyone he says that to could have any idea what he's talking about. But he keeps saying it anyway and does not elaborate. Every once in a while, he'll shift it up with "born in sin, come on in." But he usually just says, "Give me what I want and I'll go away." And it turns out at the end of the story, we learn what he wants. It's not anything that anybody could have guessed. And it's also nothing that he needed to ask permission for. It turns out at the end of the story, he can just take what he wants, as is so often true of Stephen King's villains. They can just take what they want. They don't actually need the cooperation of the plucky band of little boys in the town. They don't actually need that. I think there's some... in the first part of this, maybe the first half of this screenplay, I think there's some good stuff. As the island battened down for the storm, and as we see, the conflicting personalities, King can, when you strip away the bad prose, which is what a screenplay will do, he can be good at the clashing personalities of small towns. He can be good at that. Sort of good at that. And there are parts of that at the beginning of this that are kind of good. It gets swamped at the end with all the King nonsense, but there are parts of this that I actually enjoyed. If I found this trade paperback at one of the Vermont thrift shops that we go to all the time up here, I would probably get it, because I don't have it as an ebook, and I might read it again. It's certainly the first half of it I might read. For something completely different, we have something that is totally enjoyable. Totally out of print. I'm assuming it's totally gone. And even if it were in print, I'd be willing to bet you wouldn't get these covers. I think there were 3 books in this series. I would love to find them all, but only with these covers. This is by Mark Chadbourne, and these are historical fantasy novels. The first one, The Swords of Albion, is the series, and the first one is The Silver Skull. Those of you who are romance cover connoisseurs will recognize our boy Paul Marin. You can put a feathered cap on him, but you can't hide those cheekbones. And there were, I think, 3 of these books. I don't know why I got rid of them. I love them so much. They're set in an alternate version of Elizabethan England, where we are to understand that the forces of Albion have been at war on a mystical level. Yes, they still don't care for the Spanish, but they've been at war on a mystical level for centuries with the realm of the fairy, with the Unseelie court. And it's always a touch-and-go thing as to who's going to win. And the England of this day is guarded by the sorcery of Dr. John Dee and by a whole bunch of sword-wielding operatives who may seem on the surface to just be part of Walsingham's counterintelligence arm, but they really have more adventures than that. They indulge in high sorcery, sword and sorcery type adventures, and the main character, Will Swift, is the best of them all at everything. He's the old style James Bond in Dublin and hose with a broadsword instead of a little gun. And Mark Chadbourne just writes the hell out of these books. This is the first one in the series. I don't know if I reviewed this one. I may have just been bowled over by it and loved it and thought it was a one-off event, but then more sequels came, and I know I reviewed at least one of those sequels. Again, if I can remember and find them, I will put links to reviews down below. But if you ever see this fantasy series, The Swords of Albion, do yourself a favor and get it, because Chad Bourne, there are high stakes involved here. His portrayal of the fairy folk is very chilling, but these books are written with a very, very much a glint of humor in the eye. They are very, very enjoyable. Okay, and then we'll finish up with a novel, which I believe was, we did an Australian novel last time, didn't we? Heaven knows, Mr. Allison. I think this might be another Australian or New Zealand novel, or I'm not really sure, but I know that it was really popular before it came to America, and it bowled me over. This is Elizabeth Knox's novel, The Vintner's Luck. Don't know if it's still in print. Don't know if it still has this wonderful cover. Really wish I had this book. I don't. I will look for it. But this is a story of a man who, in the early years of the 20th century, is stumbling half drunk through his family's vineyard in Italy. Or is it France? It's been 10 years since I read this thing. But he's stumbling through the vineyard at night when he encounters an angel. And the angel is not a figment of his imagination. The angel is real. And they form a relationship. I think Elizabeth Knox does a beautiful job of leaving it ambiguous, whether or not it is love, if it's love, whether or not it is carnal, or just violently spiritual. But one thing's for sure, her angel isn't like a Pacebook hymnal angel at all. Her angel gives a view of a very different Christianity, a wilder, rawer Christianity. Her angel is a fascinating figure and agrees to meet with this human regularly at regular intervals throughout his life. The angel doesn't age, but the human does. And we get that human's whole life with these weird contrapuntal moments where in the midst of that life and all of its sprawling adventures and its loves, every once in a while, periodically, he goes into a field and meets an angel and just talks. The angel is sympathetic. The angel cares about him, but the angel is alien. The angel is, there is no attempt here to make the angel sort of a warm and fuzzy, all-knowing quasi-human. The angel is an alien being who's just has a kind of weird, unsettling affection for this man. It's a terrific, terrific book. It will stick with you. Maybe not the location of the vineyard, not for me anyway, but some of the scenes, some of the dialogue, some of the exchange between the man and the angel will stay with you forever. The closest equivalent that I can draw to it is Damiano by R.A. McAvoy, which is also historical, takes place in the Italian Renaissance, a fantasy version of the Italian Renaissance, in which the main character, Damiano, regularly converses with the Archangel Raphael. And in that book, as in this one, the angel is more alien than divine. Very, very good. It was very different in this book. And this is, much as I hate to say it, R.A. McAvoy is one of my favorite fantasy authors, but this is a better book. So that's a final installment in the Library of the Lost for today. Hope there was something in there of interest to you. I'm trying another background here in my constant ongoing war with the lighting in this old house. The house seems not to like BookTube. I'm hoping that it worked a little better here. I'm hoping that the iPad was at least a little more visible, and I'll keep experimenting. But in the meantime, I will try to remember to leave all the written links down below. A number of you keep writing to me. I don't know what I did to deserve it, but a number of you keep writing to me saying, I do like your prose. I've always liked your prose. I didn't learn about it until I learned about your BookTube channel. But every time you leave a link to your prose, I read it and think, I really like that. That was really good writing. I never hear that. Never. From anybody, including editors who eat that prose up and pay for it. I still never hear compliments about it. So that's going straight to my head. It might be making me a bit of a problem as a guest. I wouldn't know, so I'm gonna wrap this up before I get any more trouble. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.